أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين. So, inshallah, today, after having heard Shafi's beautiful recitation, I felt like it would be appropriate to talk about the story of Musa alayhi salam and Khidr alayhi salam in Surah Kahf, and to use it and to view it from the perspective as a parable about the spiritual path. And this is something that can be read in many ways and many angles. It's a deep and multi-layered story, and it has very subtle meanings and lessons. And the focus for us today is the nature of trials. And that's, what I would propose is, the central theme of this story, and what it's trying to teach us is how to deal with trials, how we deal with tribulations. And that the knowledge that Musa alayhi salam gained from Khidr alayhi salam could only come through these trials. That's how Allah prepared Musa for his mission, by putting him under somebody else's command and then subjecting him to trials. And that's usually how this religion works. That's how everything, in life works. You find a teacher to teach you something, and then, you learn from them, but as you're learning, you're subjected to different tests, and those tests will prove to you more than anybody else, what you're made of, and what of the lessons have you actually internalized, and how much work you have to do. And these trials talk in many lessons, but I want to focus on two aspects of these trials as a means of helping us understand how such trials helped him prepare for his mission, and to also help us understand how trials will help us prepare for our missions. Because Allah has a mission for every single one of us. And part of the journey in our life is to find out what this mission is and to prepare for it. And this preparation will have to come through trials. And the first and ultimate mission, of course, is to return back to Allah. So in short, what these trials do is bring us from darkness to light. It's only when we're in the state of light, when we have that light shining upon us, when we have that light shining within us, that we're actually able to see, that we're able to actually make our way in the world, regardless of whatever it is, whether it's career, whether it's relationships, whether it's activism, whatever it is that we are called to, we will only be called to it through that light. We will be guided to it through that light. So in each trial that Musa alayhi salam faces in the story, there are two things that are going on. One is that he's confronting a darkness. And two, he's being taught how to expel it with the light. And there are three stories, so there are three darknesses and three lights. So the three darknesses he faces in this story are fear, grief, and the ego, the nafs. And accordingly, there are three lights that he's taught about to repel these darknesses. The light of faith, iman, the light of acceptance, Islam, and the light of God, ihsan. And those of you who are familiar with the hadith of Jibreel, or even of many introductions to Islam, it's presented in these three ways. The first iman, faith, then acceptance or submission, Islam, and then third is spiritual excellence, ihsan. But rather than simply tell him about these lights in the way that Jibreel alayhi salam taught the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam about them, or as I'm doing in this khutbah, Khidr alayhi salam teaches him through experience. He plunges him into each darkness and lets him sit with it and wrestle with it, and then finally revealing some of the wisdom within at the end. But at the end of the day, the most of what's happening is actually being told to us. Most of what's happening is happening within Musa alayhi salam. The whole story is about him confronting these darknesses, and the resolution within them actually comes within him. And then we see that in the rest of his story through the fact of, through his life events concerning him liberating his people and guiding them. So as we go through this story, I want us to think deeply about these two aspects, the removal of darkness and the adornment of God's light. And furthermore, to think about how this applies to the trials we face in our lives. So first, we'll start with some background, and this is how the surah starts with this story. وَإِذْ قَالَ مُوسَى لِفَتَاهُ لَا أَبْرَحُ حَتَّى أَبْلُغَ مَجْمَعَ الْبَحْرَيْنِ أَوْ أَمْضِيَ حُقُبًا. And when Moses said to his attendants, I will not desist until I reach the meeting place of the two seas, or I will spend ages in my quest. The context behind this story is that some scholars give is that one day Musa alayhi salam gave a moving sermon. People were touched, hearts were softened, tears were flowing from people's eyes. Someone asked, is there anyone in this world as knowledgeable as you, O Musa? Now at this point, he was a messenger of God, someone who received revelation directly from God. And he said, no. Now this is a reasonable assumption, but this story is all about the problems of making reasonable assumptions. Because it turns out he was wrong. What he should have done, and what we should all do, and this is the point of the whole story, is to begin with God, and not with your own speculation. Faith always has to come before reason. So the first step in every matter in our lives is to first seek guidance from God, and this happens in two ways. One is through istikhara, to pray to Allah for guidance and patiently wait for signs to come. And the second is through istishara, to seek advice from people of knowledge. So Allah corrected Musa alayhi salam and told him that there is actually someone more knowledgeable than him. And Musa alayhi salam responded very beautifully to this. He asked Allah to guide him to this person. Even as a prophet, Musa alayhi salam wanted to learn. And in this ayah in Surah Al-Kahf, it teaches us his desire. He tells his companion on the journey, I'm going to seek his teacher no matter how long it takes, even if it takes ages, because he understood the value of this guidance. So they go on this search, and a few ayahs later, and after an interesting story with a fish we won't get into, they find this teacher. فَوَجَدَ عَبْدًا مِنْ عِبَادِنَا آتَيْنَاهُ رَحْمَةً مِنْ عِنْدِنَا وَعَلَّمْنَاهُ مِنْ لَدُنَّا عِلْمًا. They too found a servant from our servants, unto whom we had granted mercy from our presence, and we had taught him knowledge from our presence. Moses said to him, may I follow you so that you may teach me from that which you have been taught from guidance. So the introduction to Khidr alayhi salam in this story is very significant. First of all, his name is not given. We only know this from other sources. He's only highlighted as a servant of God, and if anything, one of many servants. One servant from many servants. So his actual identity is humbled, almost absent from this narrative. And secondly, what is stressed several times over is that this person had been given knowledge directly from God. We had granted mercy from our presence, and we had taught him knowledge from our presence. And the relationship between the two is not accidental. Rather, it teaches us that the secret to this type of knowledge, this guidance from Allah, it only goes to those who are humble. So if you want this guidance, you have to let go of all of your attachments and expectations. And as we will see, the end of the path of seeking this type of knowledge is to sublimate yourself entirely to the will of God. But this path is not easy. Khidr alayhi salam says right off the bat in the next two ayahs, قَالَ إِنَّكَ لَن تَسْتَطِيعَ مَعِيَ صَبْرًا وَكَيْفَ تَصْبِرُ عَلَى مَا لَمْ تُحِطْ بِهِ خُبْرًا. He said, truly you will never be able to have patience with me. And how can you have patience about something you're unacquainted with? In other words, Khidr alayhi salam is warning him that if you really want this knowledge, you have to be patient. You have to deal with the unknown. Because the knowledge we get from Allah, the true knowledge in the Quranic sense, is knowledge of Allah's commandment. It's knowing what Allah wants you to do. It's not knowing why, at least not at first. Allah might teach us some wisdom behind his commands, but the wisdoms are often beyond our comprehension. But if you seek in his guidance, and you have trust in it, then that means accepting that you might not know why something happens. That itself is the knowledge that Allah has to guide you to. And discovering that wisdom is part of the path itself. That's also part of the reason why Khidr alayhi salam tells Musa alayhi salam not to ask any questions until he starts speaking about it. For one, it's because part of the path is to sit with the trials and to reflect on them. And you will receive a lot of wisdom that way. Another reason, though, is because on the spiritual path, most lessons are beyond words and are meant to instruct your heart directly. So speaking about it openly is not as useful. And also because Khidr alayhi salam himself may not have received knowledge about the wisdom behind his actions. He just trusts in Allah and lets Allah take care of the guidance and the teaching. So at every step of the path, patience is required. You have to be patient in seeking the guidance. You have to be patient in understanding it. In some cases, it might take years before you truly understand the wisdom behind why something has happened. Knowledge takes time, and it's not going to come to you, not in the true sense, until you let go of your need to have control over things and you respect the knowledge for what it is. Allah is not going to entrust you with the guidance and inspiration until you show that you're humble enough to follow it. If you're too proud or selfish or lazy or skeptical or rebellious to follow it, why would He give you that additional knowledge? That comes with major responsibility. It's from His mercy that He doesn't command you before you're ready for it. So you have to start by humbling yourself and following the knowledge He has given you already. And inshallah, when you're ready, He'll give you more. Musa alayhi salam was ready for this knowledge, so Allah directed him to it. And he followed this journey, seeking it. And even then, as we have seen, Khidr alayhi salam was like, this is not an easy path. Patience is not easy when it comes to dealing with the unknown. Patience is not easy when it means you have to give up control and let Allah take care of things. Because the way Allah takes care of things is not how we take care of things. So the journey begins. And Khidr alayhi salam proceeds to take Musa alayhi salam through 3 different trials. And again, this is a very different type of teaching than what Musa alayhi salam was probably expecting. It's experiential knowledge. And for the rest of this talk, I'm going to pair the trial with the explanation, so we have a full picture of what's going on with each trial. Whereas the surah itself takes us through these trials in time. So keep in mind that Musa alayhi salam is going through these trials without having been given the explanation until the end. He's dealing with these things in his heart through experience before he can grapple with their wisdoms at an intellectual level. And this is difficult for him, which is why Khidr alayhi salam has to keep reminding him to be patient. So the first commandment comes to crack the ship. فَانْطَلَقَا حَتَّى إِذَا رَكِبَ فِي السَّفِينَةِ خَرَقَهَا. So they both continued their travel until they came on board the ship, and then he cracked it. He, Musa alayhi salam, said, "Have you cracked it so that you may drown its people? You have indeed committed something dreadful." He said, "Did I not say that you will never be able to have patience with me?" Then later on, Khidr alayhi salam explains the wisdom behind this. أما السفينة فكانت لمساكين يعلمون في البحر فأردت أن أعيبها وكان وراءهم ملك يأخذ كل سفينة غصبا. As for the ship, it belonged to some poor men who work in the sea. So I wanted to flaw it, because beyond them there was a king who was confiscating every ship by force. So what is Musa alayhi salam being confronted here with, seeing, his teacher break the ship without any seeming explanation? He's being confronted with the darkness of fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of what bad things might come, fear of the future. It's a very reasonable fear. And as are most spiritual problems, it is reasonable. This was his first instinct when seeing Khidr alayhi salam do something he did not understand. It was not simply to ask, "Why did you do that?" That's curiosity and seeking understanding. No, his response was to jump to the worst case scenario of what was happening and to accuse Khidr alayhi salam of that. You're going to drown these people? You've done something dreadful. He's accusing him of doing something. He's not even asking about it. And that's coming from fear. And then Khidr alayhi salam does not give any explanation aside from saying, "Be patient." That's it. He left Musa alayhi salam to reflect not just on the action, but also, and more importantly, on why he responded in this way. Why did he forget that this was a man of God who had superior knowledge? Why did he respond so accusatorily? Why couldn't he just see the wisdom behind what was happening? Because he was dealing with fear. It's a darkness that clouds your judgment, and more importantly, drives you to believe in the worst things. It keeps you up at night, prevents you from eating, makes you want to shrivel up. And as with everything on the path, this is ultimately about death. That's the real fear we have to contend with, coming to understanding about our meeting with Allah and dealing with the uncertainty therein. And what Allah was trying to teach Musa alayhi salam through this trial was that the cure to fear cannot be anything other than iman, faith. That whatever happens, that whatever comes from God, you have to have faith in it, and you have to trust in God when it comes to the outcome. When facing the future, when facing the unknown, you have to have hope. And that comes from recognizing that Allah is in control of the future. And when you truly realize that, all stress and anxiety passes. If Allah wanted that ship to sink, faith dictates that it's for a good reason. And of course, Khidr alayhi salam reveals that reason to prevent an even worse harm, the tyrannical king coming their way. So this is the light of Iman. It is a light of hope, of optimism, of having faith in Allah's plan, of having a good opinion of Allah, and of praying to Allah to make things right. It is a light that reflects Allah's beautiful attributes, His mercy, His reward, His caring, His safety. When you feel fear, remember His beauty. When you feel fear, exalt Him and say Subhanallah. When you feel fear, remember the mercy He sent to us and sing salawat on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Remember all of the blessings He has given you. This will, inshallah, bring down those feelings and increase your trust and reliance on the one who is in control of the future and who has the power to make everything right. This is the light of knowing Allah, of knowing that Allah is with you in your actions. Hence, Khidr alayhi salam speaks of this as if it were his own will, even though Allah is the one who told him to do it. He says, so I wanted to fly it. And ultimately, this was preparation for Musa alayhi salam to deal with God's commandment. Because when Allah calls you to do things, you cannot act out of fear. So when Allah calls him and tells him to go speak with Pharaoh, he has to trust that Allah will care for him against this tyrant and remove his fear of him. When Allah tells him to strike his staff and part the sea, he has to trust that Allah will keep the sea parted and drown his enemies and not his people. He doesn't know how his mission is going to turn out. He doesn't know if Pharaoh is going to accept the truth or try to kill him and his people. All he knows is what Allah wants him to do. And he has to trust in that guidance and follow it, repelling his fear with the light of faith. So if the first trial was about fear of the future, the second is about facing one's grief over the past. فانطلقا حتى إذا لقي غلاما فقتله قال أقتلت نفسا زكية بغير نفس وقد جئت شيئا نكرا قال ألم أقل لك إنك لن تستطيع معي صبرا. Then they both continued their journey until they met a young man, and he, Khidr, killed him. He, Musa alayhi salam, said, have you killed an innocent life for no other life? You have indeed committed something abominable. Khidr said, did I not tell you that you will never be able to have patience with me? And again, it's only at the end of this journey that an explanation comes. And as for the young man, his parents were believers, so we feared that he will compel them towards transgression and disbelief. So we wanted that their Lord will give them a replacement with a child better than him in purity and closer in mercy. Now, one thing to pause and reflect on here is the fact that these are difficult trials. Allah will only test you with what you can bear, but He will test you, and those trials will be very difficult. And they will put you in these situations where you will have to choose between hope and fear, between acceptance and grief, between good and evil. Because through this struggle, you purify yourself, come to know God better, come to know yourself better, come closer to God, and become a better person. It's out of God's love and concern for you that He subjects you to these difficulties, to provide you with ways to become elevated. Hence, the Prophet ﷺ said that the people most tested by God are those most beloved to Him. And this is also why Allah teaches us about their struggles, so that we may learn from their example. So what is Musa alayhi salam being confronted with here? He's being confronted with a darkness of grief. Grief over something that has happened. The overwhelming mix of sadness and anger that come when one feels that it shouldn't have happened, that was avoidable, that was wrong, to feel that harm. That was his first instinct upon seeing Khidr alayhi salam, who again, Allah said, had more knowledge than him. Upon seeing him committing action that he couldn't comprehend. And again, he jumped to the most negative interpretation, that this young man was pure and innocent, which he was not, and that this act was senseless and abominable, which it was not. Again, Khidr alayhi salam does not give any explanation, aside from saying, didn't I tell you, you have to be patient. He left Musa alayhi salam to deal with his grief, to struggle to understand the wisdom in what happened, to wonder again, why did I respond in this way with such accusations? It was because he was dealing with grief. And particularly one aspect of grief he was dealing with was over his own killing of an innocent soul. Even though it was an accident so long in the past, and even though he was still chosen and guided by Allah, he was still grieving over it and had not fully accepted what had happened. So Allah was teaching Musa alayhi salam through this trial was that the cure to grief cannot be anything but the acceptance of and submission to God's decree. This is what is meant by the words Islam and Taslim, surrender and submission. That whatever has happened in the past has happened, and Allah knows full well about it. And that whatever Allah ordains to happen or have happened, we have to accept it. So if it's something we did wrong, we seek Allah's forgiveness and guidance on how to rectify it. And then we trust that Allah is all forgiving and hope in that. But if it's something that was out of our control and still harmed us, then we have to come to accept it, to seek healing, and to find comfort in the fact that it was Allah's will and that He had done it for a good reason. This is the light of knowledge, of ilm, of furqan. It is a light that bears down heavily, like the sun. If Iman is the light that establishes truth, ilm is the light that distinguishes falsehood. It is a light that reflects Allah's majesty, His control, His power, His knowledge, His justice. When you feel grief, remember that He is in charge and He's the most just. When you feel grief, magnify Him, say Allahu Akbar. When you feel grief, remember that He forgives and heals all. So say istighfar and make dua for peace and healing. Inshallah, it will come. And as difficult in dealing with the past may be, what this trial teaches us is that these difficulties have many hidden wisdoms in them. And as hard as these things might be, there is actually a lot of relief in realizing that Allah acted in this way for your best interest. He made the hard decision for you, so you didn't have to. If He shuts a door that you were trying to go through, it was because He knew there was harm behind it. And He didn't want to put you through the difficult test of having to close it yourself, especially if it was something you wanted, since you might not have closed it. So He shuts it for you to protect you. So in dealing with Allah's will, just remember that He knows the entire picture. He has complete knowledge, and He acts from that knowledge. And sometimes that knowledge will manifest in ways that might hurt in the short term, but will be beneficial in the long term. As He tells us, perhaps you might dislike a thing and it is good for you, and perhaps you might like a thing and it is evil for you. So in order for Musa alayhi salam to move forward with his mission, he had to resolve the grief from his past. He fled his home and didn't want to return because of that grief, because of his guilt over having killed someone. And of course, one of the first things Pharaoh challenges him with was the fact that he killed someone. He wanted to re-traumatize him, to fill him with grief and sadness, to stop him in his tracks, to paralyze him, to stop the guidance from coming. But it didn't work because Musa alayhi salam went with the light of God and had dealt with the grief and had the strength to bear these accusations and these reminders. And this was also a preparation for Musa alayhi salam to learn how to deal with the fact that sometimes difficult and heavy things will happen on the path. That God may lead you to do things that you did not expect, or to outcomes that you might not have expected. Outcomes that may make you really sad and distressed. And in those moments, the only way to deal with our grief is to accept that. Accept that this is Allah's will, and trust that that is what is best, because He sees more than you do. He sees everything, and you can only see what is very limited, and what He gives you the power to see even. This is the light of knowing that Allah is your Lord, and that you are His servant. Hence, Khidr alayhi salam speaks of his action as if there are two wills at work, His and God's. And he's very careful to highlight that distinction. He says, so we wanted that their Lord will give them a replacement better than Him. We wanted that their Lord will give them a replacement. Then comes the final trial in the story. And with it, Musa alayhi salam had to deal with the third and the most complex darkness, the darkness of the ego, the nafs. فانطلقا إذا أتيا أهل قرية استطعما أهلها فأبوا أن يضيفوهما فوجدا فيها جدارا يريد أن ينقض فأقاما قال لو شئت لاتخذت عليه أجرا. Then they both continued their journey until they came to a townspeople. And they sought food from the people thereof, but they refused to give them any hospitality. Then they found therein a wall, which was about to fall, and he, Khidr alayhi salam, raised it up. He, Musa alayhi salam, said, if you had so willed, you could indeed have taken a fee for it. Then Khidr alayhi salam tells him this is the end of the journey. And he gives the explanation for each of the trials. As for this one with the wall, he says, and as for the wall, it belonged to 2 orphan boys in the city, and there was a treasure underneath it for both of them. And their father was a righteous man. And your Lord wanted that their age of maturity, that they reach their age of maturity, and they will bring out their treasure as a mercy from your Lord. So what is Musa alayhi salam being confronted with here? The darkness of the lower self, of the nafs. The darkness that thinks in selfish terms, that lashes out in anger and impatience when stressed, that craves immediate satisfaction. The darkness that calls out to creation before even thinking of the creator. So Khidr alayhi salam brought him into a stressful situation. People aren't welcoming you. They aren't giving you food. You're hungry, you're poor, you're tired. You're just uncomfortable. And under these circumstances, your teacher, Khidr alayhi salam, goes and fixes the law. He does service without asking for any reward whatsoever. A means for, food, a means for some sort of remuneration. He doesn't even think about that. He just goes and fixes this wall. And that's when Musa alayhi salam responded from his nafs, from his hunger, saying, basically, we could have gotten money for that. We could have gotten some sort of support. We could have eaten, implying again, like we're hungry, we're tired. Why would you have done this, without, asking for some sort of support or help, because these people aren't going to give us anything otherwise. Again, the question is why he responded in this way. Not even asking why he did what he did, but challenging the act directly and suggesting that something different should have happened. It's because he was dealing with his nafs, his ego. And that ego put its own satisfaction in the way of doing a genuine good act of service. So Allah was teaching Musa alayhi salam through this trial was of the dangers of the ego when carrying out Allah's will. If they had asked for money, people would have learned about the wall and the treasure would have been lost. If you're going to follow Allah's guidance, you have to remove your ego from it, even when it seems to make reasonable suggestions. Because again, those reasonable suggestions are often wrong. If you're doing an act of good, do it purely for Allah. Seek your reward from Him and not other people. If you seek it from Him, He will reward you directly and immensely. This is why fasting is one of the greatest, rewarded acts, is because it's something we do purely for Allah. Everything else people might see, but us abstaining from things, us abstaining from food and from drink, from various pleasures of this world, only Allah knows truly what's going on. Only Allah sees that sacrifice. And that's when He says in the Hadith Qudsi, this my servant has left his food and drink for me, so I'm going to reward him directly from my own account. But if you seek your rewards from other people, the act will be ruined, and the reward of it will be potentially ruined. So this is the light of ihsan, of spiritual excellence. It is a light that reflects Allah's own essence. It is the light of pure reliance on Allah's will and command, the commitment to do good regardless of what happens, with no fear and no grief, just pure focus on Allah's guidance. When you feel your ego squeaking out, forget it and remember Allah and praise Him. This is the light that teaches you to get out of the way and do what needs to be done. Hence, Khidr alayhi salam speaks of this selfless action in truly selfless terms, as if he only saw Allah's will at work. He said, your Lord wanted that they reach their age of maturity, and they will bring out their treasure as a mercy from your Lord. He's not even saying our Lord. He's saying your Lord wanted this to happen. He's completely out of the equation, as if He doesn't even exist. He simply sees what Allah wants and works to fulfill it. And this ultimately is preparation for Musa alayhi salam for his whole generation ahead. Because this mission of guiding his community will not be successful if his ego gets in the way, and if his focus wavers even 1 degree away from Allah. He's going to be confronted with obstacles every step of the way, not knowing the outcomes, of whether Pharaoh will listen or not, of whether his followers will stick to the faith or go back to their idolatry, of whether they'll follow him or betray him, of whether he'll successfully guide them or not. The only way he'll succeed in his mission is to have that firm belief that Allah is with him and to expect his reward only from Allah and not respect his reward from anything of the dunya. If you place your hopes in this world, you will only be disappointed. Sooner or later, you're going to be disappointed. If you place your hope in Allah, you will only find contentment. So take yourself out of the equation. Stop thinking so much about yourself, even whether it's good or bad thoughts, because even the bad thoughts are thoughts about yourself, your ego, your prideful expectations of who you are and who you thought you were. You know, focus on Allah instead. Focus on Allah and his attributes, and you'll get all you need. If you need strength, ask him for strength, and he'll give it to you. If you need ease, ask him for ease, and he'll give it to you. Everything comes from him, so you should be asking from him over and over and directly. And if you ask for something and he doesn't give it, then that means he's giving you something better. That there's something better for you and he's preparing you for that. And he's going to help you with that. So the only thing you have to relinquish is yourself. And it's going to happen anyway, whether you like it or not. The only question is a matter of when, whether you do it here in this world or on the day of judgment. And the only question is whether you do it willingly or unwillingly. So hence Khidr's parting words are, وَمَا فَعَلْتُهُ عَنْ أَمْرِي. I did not do any of this from my accord. He acted on the guidance from his Lord. His Lord told him to do certain things, and he did them. And to get knowledge, he had to deal with his fear. He had to deal with his grief. He had to deal with his ego. And in return, Allah gave him the light of faith, the light of knowledge, and the light of the Spirit. So every story that Allah tells us in the Quran is teaching us how to be with him. That's ultimately what the Quran is. It's a book about our relationship with Allah, and by extension, our relationship with his creation. It's a book of character. And everything in it makes me realize that, makes us realize that. Once we realize that, the lessons within it become real and practical. And for this story, we have to recognize that this is the purpose of trials, to test us, to teach us how to go back to Allah. And one of the wisdoms behind reading Surah Al-Kahf every Friday, like we just heard today, is to remind us of this, that Allah subjects us to trials to help us deal with our fear, deal with our grief, deal with our lower selves, to prepare us for our meeting with him, to prepare us for the guidance, to prepare us for the light. So when we look at our own lives and difficulties, we might be tempted to react out of grief or fear or selfishness. But if you really want contentment with Allah and with his plan, you should seek to view everything as a part of your path, as a means by which Allah is gently, and sometimes not so gently, urging you to purify yourself and prepare yourself for your meeting with him. You don't have to put anything on yourself. You don't have to go out and see trials or anything like that. You don't have to feel brave or whatever. You're not brave, you're weak. Just make dua for guidance and wait for Allah to bring it. You're weak, you're hasty, you have all these flaws. Allah is the one who's perfect. So find your strength with him. Find your guidance from him. Find your help from him. And if you ask, he'll answer. And this applies to everything in our lives, especially nowadays when it comes to all the problems we might face in our personal lives or in our societies. There's so much confusion about what to do and how to do it, and what each person should be doing. Again, whether it's in work, whether it's relationships, whether it's our life's mission, whether it's in activism, whether it's in justice, across the world. The only way to be certain of what you can and should be doing is to turn back to Allah, to make istighfar, to purify yourself and prepare yourself for the journey by seeking God's forgiveness, to seek Allah's help through prayer and patience, building your iman, to seek help from others when you need it, and you will definitely need it. And when the guidance comes, especially when the guidance comes to your heart, and when you're ready, it will come upon your heart, and you'll feel it. You have to be ready to submit to it and act on it. As courageous as you have to be, as brave as you have to be, as fear-inspiring, as grief-inspiring, as uncomfortable as it might be, you have to respond to it. But Allah is there, because he's the one who's giving you the guidance. He's the one who's going to help you through the trial. if you remember, and if you act firmly within your faith, if you work firmly with his light, walk firmly with his light, you will have that help. It will actually be a lot easier than you think. So go with the light of God. So we ask Allah for guidance and contentment and ease in all of our affairs. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين. جزاكم الله خيرا والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Jazakallah khair, Ustadh Wasim, for that wonderful reflection and those wisdoms. May Allah bless you, and we really appreciate you taking your time out to be with us and with your presence and knowledge today. Jazakallah khair again. We're going to go ahead and start the dua then. Nusrat, if you're there.
Hi, Asalaamwalaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Jazakallah khair, Wasim. That was so beautiful and applicable. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأزواجه وصحبه وسلم. Ya Allah, we send prayers upon Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his companions, and all of the people of his household. Ya Allah, we turn to you for forgiveness from our sins. Only you know what they are, and only you can save us from them. O most merciful of those who show mercy, O most merciful of those who show mercy, O most merciful of those who show mercy. We ask for justice for those suffering, relief for those who have had their loved ones pass away. Ya Allah, grant us strength to fight against oppression and uplift Black Lives Matter. Ya Allah, grant contentment to the mothers whose sons were victims of police brutality. Relieve those who are deprived, burdened, oppressed, and in debt. Ya Allah, recover Yemen and enable us to help. Ya Allah, remove their questioning on the Day of Judgment and grant them Jannah with ease. To all people around the world and in our own communities who are in perpetual hardship, Ya Allah, make us useful servants. Ya Allah, every single person has their individual grief, and we all share in a collective grief. The spectrum of hardship in itself is so vast. There are people who have been so hungry their entire lives, and many of us will never be able to understand that kind of longing. Ya Allah, give them even a little bit of relief in this world, as it will take nothing away from you, as your bounties are vast and your mercy even greater. Ya Allah, grant us patience through it all, fill our hearts with tranquility and peace, cleanse our hearts of hatred and jealousy. Ya Allah, we have never been disappointed in our prayers to you. Enable us to be steadfast throughout the trials we encounter now and in the future. Ya Allah, the sadness doesn't always just go away. It just needs to be understood. And who better to understand than you, Ya Rab? Ya Latif, Ya Latif, Ya Latif, O most gentle one, deliver your qadr to us with gentleness. Ya Allah, refine our hearts to return to you before we actually return. When we are distracted by the dunya, make us remember that we are not from here. To you we belong and to you we will return. Ya Allah, allow us to see our hardships and pain as what they truly are, a means to get closer to you, as that's the only thing that truly matters. Ya Allah, we seek refuge in you from bad character and bad actions and bad desires. We seek refuge in you from our egos and our nafs. Make our hearts fully in love with you and only you, Ya Wadud, Ya Wali. Make us worthy enough to be your friend. Choose us to be the people most beloved to you. Lift your veil of light and allow us to see you and all of your beauty with nothing in between us. Ease our crossing of the Sirat and the bridge before paradise. We are in need of whatever goodness you will grant us. Ya Allah, grant ease and relief to our beloved Imam Sohaib, Arshi, Radiya, and their family. We only complain of our grief and suffering to you. Ya Allah, answer our du'as. You are the all-hearing, all-knowing. We send our blessings and peace upon your messenger, our guide, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Ameen, ameen, ameen. Bi rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin.